Samantha Hayes, 36 years old, currently working as a freelance creative director in brand design. Though I had been married to Ethan for nearly 8 years, I never truly felt like I belonged to his family, the Aldridges, a prominent clan in the northern suburbs of Boston, where everything was draped in decorum and status. Ethan had once made me believe that love could bridge every gap. We met during our final year of college. I was working at a campus print shop to cover tuition, while he studied supply chain management, fully supported by his parents. Our relationship started with conversations about typography and color theory, and quickly ignited like a spark on a cold night. A year later he proposed, with a sapphire ring, elegant, expensive, and far beyond anything I could afford. I used to think that marrying Ethan meant gaining a new family, but no one ever told me that some doors don't open just because you wear a wedding ring. The Aldridge family was the embodiment of old-school power, polite but distant, wealthy but rigid. My father-in-law, Franklin Aldridge, had founded and led a nationwide consumer branding firm. He had a booming voice and loved talking about brand strategy and long-term value, even over breakfast. My mother-in-law, Lenora, was the quintessential social matriarch, organizing charity galas, orchestrating cocktail parties, always smiling, always perfectly dressed like she'd stepped out of a magazine cover. I once admired how she controlled every room without raising her voice, until I realized her gaze often slid past me like I was an underwhelming detail in an otherwise polished layout. Ethan's sister Serena held a senior executive position in their father's company. She was hailed as the heir apparent, not just for her intelligence, but for her sweetly sharpened ability to undermine. Every compliment from her sounded warm, until I realized it was a dagger cloaked in velvet. Ethan's younger brother Tyler, 6 years my junior, changed jobs constantly and never held anything longer than a year, yet no one faulted him. To them, Tyler was a free spirit, an undiscovered artist. I, on the other hand, could work until 2 in the morning on a project and only get a half smile and a comment like, "Well, as long as you're still passionate." I tried to fit in. I attended charity events with Lenora, learned how to pronounce Burgundy versus Pinot Noir so Serena wouldn't correct me at dinner, picked out carefully chosen birthday gifts with handwritten notes, none of which they ever seemed to notice. At Aldrich gatherings, I dressed just enough to blend in, never too bold, fearing that if I stood out they'd turn those evaluating eyes on me. Ethan would often say, "Just relax, they'll come around," in their own way. But their way was a smile with a sting, a glance that never lingered, a reminder of family traditions I was never really a part of. I used to think I was strong enough. I believed love and patience would earn their approval. But eventually I began to understand. Some doors aren't meant to be forced open, because behind them is nothing but distance and the chill of exclusion. In the early years of marriage, I kept my freelance brand design business. My office was just a small corner of our 2-bedroom apartment, but I could work there for hours without fatigue. My first clients came from old contacts and word-of-mouth referrals. Not every project was glamorous, but each piece reflected my voice. Creative, layered, and deeply personal. To the Aldridges, though, it was merely a cute passion project. "Oh, Samantha does little design things here and there," Lenora once told a friend, while I sat right beside her, still holding my wine glass. I remember smiling politely, though my fingers tightened until my nails left marks on my palm. Serena was subtler. "That's adorable," she said about a brand identity I created for a small coffee chain in New Hampshire. "I'm sure they came to you because they know you're my sister-in-law." I knew I wasn't truly welcome, but what hurt more was Ethan's silence. He never insulted me, but he never defended me either. Whenever I brought up their passive jabs, he'd repeat one line: "You're overthinking it." So I adjusted. I swapped out bright colors for Lenora's neutral silks. I practiced the proper pronunciation of wine labels. I nodded through endless talk about investment portfolios and vacation properties. I gave up iced lattes with straws. Apparently they weren't refined enough. I became a version of myself carved to be just tolerable, never sharp enough to be mocked, never real enough to be accepted. In our 4th year of marriage, Ethan was promoted to East Coast Regional Director, which meant constant travel to the Midwest. We didn't really discuss it. He brought home contracts, I adjusted our life. Late-night client calls became burdensome. I started turning down projects, telling myself I'd pick things back up when Ethan settled in. Soon, my client list dwindled to a few loyal names, my calendar emptied, and I got used to eating dinner alone. The turning point came last April when I found out I was pregnant. It was unexpected but sweet. I thought, maybe this baby would be the bridge we needed, I told Ethan as he packed for a trip to Minneapolis. He hugged me, kissed my forehead, and said, "That's wonderful, are you okay? I can't cancel this trip though." I gave a faint smile and stepped aside, like always. Less than 2 weeks later, I miscarried at 10 weeks. It was a rainy afternoon and I lay curled up on the cold tile floor of our bathroom, one hand on my stomach, the other gripping my phone. But I didn't call anyone. I didn't want to hear another, "Maybe it wasn't meant to be," or "You're still young." Eventually, I called Chloe, my sister. She drove 3 hours from Providence in the middle of the night. When I woke the next morning, the smell of ginger broth and toast filled the kitchen. She didn't ask questions. She just sat beside me, quietly, all day. As for the Aldridges, Ethan sent one text, "I'll call tonight. I'm sorry." He never called. Lenora sent a bouquet of white lilies and a handwritten note, "Everything happens for a reason, maybe it just wasn't the right time." No one visited, no one asked if I was in pain. Maybe to them, that child had never existed enough to be mourned. I used to think I could keep enduring, but that afternoon, curled on the couch as sunlight cut through the blinds, I realized I was wearing myself away, piece by piece, in a life I'd helped build, but no longer recognized. And all of that led to the summer barbecue. The day it all finally fell apart. The Aldridge family's annual 4th of July barbecue took place on the first Sunday of July, an event Lenora had been planning since April, with the guest list categorized by status, dietary preferences, and notoriety among local business elites. I spent the entire Saturday morning baking a peach cobbler using my grandmother's recipe, the only dessert Serena had ever acknowledged as pretty decent. I used the most expensive organic butter, carefully arranged each peach slice like artwork, and baked it in a new ceramic dish I had bought from Charleston just for the occasion. Ethan didn't help much. He was busy on a call with a regional director in Denver, still wearing wrinkled golf shorts and a shirt when I carried the dessert out to the car. "We don't want to be late," he said as he hit the gas, without asking if I had eaten. Franklin and Lenora's house sat atop a hill on the west side of Newton, where lawns were trimmed by robotic mowers, and backyard parties always featured a chef hired by the hour to man the grill. When we arrived, Serena was already greeting guests at the gate with a glass of rosé, while Richard proudly showcased his new smoker imported from Germany. "Sam, that dress is vibrant," Serena said, scanning me up and down like a barcode. "Where's the cobbler? I'm sure there's a spot for it in the prep kitchen." I stifled a sigh and walked into the kitchen, where Lenora was directing uniformed staff to arrange dishes according to a seating chart. "Oh, Samantha, you didn't need to bring anything. We've got the catering covered," she said coolly. "But that's sweet, just leave it in the back fridge." I opened the fridge in the back, crammed with bottles of organic beet juice and guest-brought sauces stacked precariously. I placed my cobbler in the far corner, feeling like I was tucking away a part of myself into that cold, dim space. Back in the garden, I saw Ethan chatting with a group of men about logistics markets. No one noticed me. No one asked what I was working on these days. I stood for a while by the salad table, fingering a plastic plate, eyes scanning for a familiar face in a sea of polite indifference. Lunch came quickly with the sound of clinking glasses and the scent of grilled meat drifting across the lawn. I sat next to Uncle Thomas, the only Aldridge relative who ever asked about books, but he was deep into a golf story with Richard. Ethan was seated across from me, leaning towards Serena, laughing loudly at some tale about a TV star she'd seen at the gym. Just as I raised my fork, planning to mention a new bakery design project I had just completed, Serena's voice cut through the air, loud, clear, and intentional. "Hey Ethan, if Sam disappeared tomorrow, do you think anyone would notice? I mean, I probably wouldn't." A moment of breathless silence. Then laughter. Steady, merciless, and familiar. Lenora gave a delicate chuckle, like Serena had just shared a cat video. Richard snorted. Ethan smirked and reached for another beer. I didn't say anything, didn't laugh. I gently set my plate down, raised my skewer like a glass in a toast, looked Serena dead in the eye, and said softly, but loud enough for the entire table, "Let's find out." Everyone paused. 1 beat. 2. Serena blinked, her smile faltering slightly. Ethan glanced at me, but said nothing. Lenora quickly filled the gap. "Who wants more watermelon? Franklin just sliced some." The rest of the afternoon drifted by in soft jazz and scattered small talk. I didn't say another word, but inside small waves had begun to churn into something stronger. Back at home, I didn't change, I didn't wash my face. I opened my laptop and started typing, line by line, item by item. Bank accounts, rental agreements, old friends, freelance clients I'd once turned away. A list of doors I had shut that now stood ready to be reopened. That night, when Ethan stepped out of the bathroom, he saw me sitting on the couch with a packed suitcase. "What are you doing?" he asked, voice still damp with steam. I looked him straight in the eyes. "Remember what Serena said? That no one would notice if I disappeared?" He was silent. I stood up, grabbed my suitcase, and walked toward the door. Let's find out if she was right. And I walked out of that house, light as the cotton dress I wore, but with a weight in my chest so heavy, no suitcase could have carried it for me. I arrived in Seattle on a foggy Monday morning, nearly a week after leaving the house in Newton. The city appeared hazy, like my future, unclear, yet oddly gentle. I rented a small studio apartment in Capitol Hill where Olivia, my college best friend, lived with her husband and daughter. It was barely 375 square feet with old wooden floors, a tiny kitchen, and olive green walls peeling in places. But when I set my mini coffee maker on the counter, opened my laptop, and drew the curtains to let in the morning sun, I realized it was the first space I had chosen entirely on my own in years. I started by removing every remnant of the Aldridges, old business cards, LinkedIn profiles influenced by Ethan's connections, and design samples I had watered down to suit traditional client tastes. I reopened a folder labeled Concepts, Drafts, Personal, filled with sketches I had never dared to show. To keep from sinking into sadness, I began therapy with a specialist Olivia recommended. Her name was Robin Travers, in her 60s, always in plum cardigans, with eyes that seemed to see the part of you even you avoided. In our first session she asked, "Do you still know what you want?" I sat in silence for 3 full minutes. At first I took small freelance gigs, ebook covers, brand kits for boba startups, a few Instagram templates for a mom blogger. The income wasn't much, but every time a client wrote back, "Looks amazing, thanks for listening," my heart warmed just a bit. One rainy Wednesday afternoon I ducked into a corner cafe called June and Cedar. The place smelled like fresh pastries and dark roast beans, lit by amber pendant lights and lined with raw brick walls. As I waited in line, I was drawn to a massive mural along the side wall. Bold strokes, rich colors. Like a dream someone forgot to finish. "Are you the artist?" a woman's voice asked behind me. I turned around. She was in her 50s. Silver-streaked hair and a low ponytail, denim jacket, eyes sharp as an X-ray and smiling. "I'm a graphic designer," I replied. "Or, I used to be at least." She nodded. "I'm Eleanor Finch, owner of this cafe. I'm looking for someone to redesign our menu boards and the to-go coffee packaging, but I don't need business cards, I need to see something real." We sat at a windowside table. I opened my iPad and showed her the folder labeled Concepts, Drafts, Personal. Eleanor flipped through each design, occasionally zooming in on tiny details I'd once thought no one would notice. "You've been dulled by people who never understood where your strength lies," she said. "I don't hire people because they're perfect, I hire them because they're real." Eleanor wasn't just the first client who truly believed in me. She became my spark. She introduced me to a florist who needed new sticker labels. Then a retro-style bakery owner reached out for seasonal gift box designs. Each project was small, but I had creative freedom. And most importantly, I got to be myself. Robin, my therapist, noticed the change clearly after a month. "The Samantha from our first session wouldn't look me in the eye for more than 3 seconds, she said. "Now you're arguing with me about organic gum packaging design?" I laughed. "For real." One morning, Eleanor texted and asked me to stop by the cafe early. I walked in to find her waiting with a silver-haired man in tortoiseshell glasses. "This is Mr. Layton, creative director at an organic food company," she said. I showed him your coffee box mock-up. We talked for almost an hour. In the end, he handed me his card. "If you're interested in working on the Sheffield Food Group rebrand campaign, give me a call." I held the card, my mind spinning. Sheffield was one of the largest subsidiaries of Aldridge Enterprises. I didn't know if it was fate or some elaborate twist of irony. But what I knew for certain, this time, I would walk in under my own name, not as Ethan Aldridge's wife or someone connected to the Calwells. Just Samantha. And for me, that was enough. I accepted the rebrand project for Sheffield Natural Foods after 3 days of thinking and 2 sleepless nights. Wesley Creative, the lead agency, sent a clear brief, generous budget, flexible timeline, and nearly complete creative freedom. I had no idea about the Aldridge connection until I read the last line of the overview. Sheffield is a subsidiary of Caldwell Group, the corporation owned by Franklin Aldridge. I stared at the screen, my blood chilling in my palms. Caldwell Group. That name used to be everywhere in my life, on envelopes, on Ethan's business cards, even on the napkins at Lenora's gift exchange parties. But this time it was different. I wasn't entering this project as someone's wife. I was the freelancer chosen for my work. When Thomas, the creative director at Westlake, called to confirm, I asked directly, "Will Sheffield be involved hands-on?" "No," he replied. "All execution and approvals go through us, but they will be present at the brand launch gala next month." I held the phone, staring at the ceiling, torn inside. Part of me wanted to back out. Another part saw clearly that this was the kind of opportunity I'd dreamed of but never dared to imagine. In the end, I took a breath. "I'll attend." The gala took place at Broadmoor Grand Hall, the same venue that once hosted countless charity auctions Lenora presided over. That night, I wore a deep emerald jumpsuit, elegantly fitted, with my hair in a low bun and black pearl earrings. Simple, refined, not a detail out of place. Eleanor called it soft armor. I smiled. I knew exactly who I was dressing for, and more importantly, who no longer mattered. As I stepped into the foyer, the chandelier's crystal glow reflected in the glass, making the room shimmer. Thomas came over and shook my hand firmly. "You're the highlight of the night," he said. I didn't answer, just smiled, silently tucking that comment away as a gift to myself. 15 minutes later, I heard a familiar laugh. Deep, wide, and sure of itself. Franklin Aldridge. I turned and saw all 4 of them entering together. Franklin wore a charcoal tuxedo, his eyes sweeping the room like he was surveying assets. Lenora had on the emerald necklace I once helped her choose for the company's 40th anniversary gala. Serena, unsurprisingly, stood out the most. One-shoulder white dress, red lipstick, her arm linked with a new boyfriend I didn't recognize. Ethan came last, champagne in one hand, the other in his pocket, eyes more tired than I remembered. I didn't flinch. I stood where I was, sipped my cocktail, and kept my gaze steady. Franklin was the first to spot me. He froze, just for a second, then approached. "Samantha," he said, voice measured. "Well, this is unexpected." "I'm the lead designer for Sheffield's new campaign," I replied, shaking his hand with just enough grip. "It's good to see you again." He couldn't fully hide the awkwardness. "You've done quite well," he admitted. "We weren't informed that you were involved." "I believe selections were made based on work quality, not personal affiliations," I answered. Lenora stepped in next. She gave the same social smile she always had. "You look well, Samantha. That dress is lovely." "It's a jumpsuit, but thank you," I replied curtly. Serena lingered just behind, fingers tightening slightly around her glass. "You're actually working here?" "No. I'm running the work here," I said, looking her straight in the eye, independently. A beat of silence, then Serena pressed her lips together. "Congrats," but her tone had more salt than sugar. A few minutes later, Ethan walked over, alone. "Can we talk, privately?" he asked, his voice hoarse. I nodded. We stepped out into the hallway, where the music was just a faint hum. "You've changed," he said, emotion unhidden in his eyes. "No," I corrected him. "I just returned to the person I was before I tried becoming part of your family." He nodded slowly. "I know. It took a year, but I finally saw everything I missed." I stayed quiet. "Is there any chance we could start over?" I looked at him, the man who was once my whole world, once the only support I clung to. Now, he was just a familiar face. Polite, remorseful, but no longer heavy enough to alter the path I was walking. "I wish you happiness," I said, my voice soft but firm. "Truly." He bowed his head. "I understand." I turned back toward the hall, where Thomas was waving to signal that the introductions were beginning. When the spotlight hit me and my designs appeared on the giant screen, I no longer saw a faded version of Samantha seated quietly at a banquet table. The presentation ended to a round of sustained applause. I stepped down from the stage, with my head held high and my breath steady. No shadow clung to me anymore. No gaze could make me shrink again. I was just about to leave the presentation area when I saw Serena standing directly in my path, her expression cold but focused. "You took this project on purpose, didn't you?" she asked, no greeting, just the question. "No," I replied. "Westlake reached out. At the time, I had no idea Sheffield was owned by Caldwell Group. And when you found out, I had already signed the contract. And I don't back out of a project just because people who once looked down on me happened to be in the audience." Her face tightened. "You don't think this looks like revenge?" I gave a small smile. "Revenge? That's odd, considering I didn't have to do anything. My work brought me here, and it was your eyes that never left me during the entire presentation." Serena stood still for a beat, then glanced toward where Thomas was chatting with the media team. "Tonight, my presentation also includes a segment on the Sheffield campaign. Then the audience will definitely get another perspective," I said, "especially if that segment gives proper credit." I turned and walked away, leaving that sentence hanging behind me. I didn't need to threaten, I just needed the truth on my side. I had just picked up an espresso from the bar when Lenora appeared. She was with an older friend I recognized, but the moment she saw me, she smiled and walked over. "May we speak privately for a moment, Samantha?" Without a word, I followed her. We moved toward a side hallway, where the noise of the event faded. "I know there were a lot of misunderstandings in the past," she began, using the practiced grace of an experienced hostess. "And maybe I wasn't always as sensitive as I should have been." I remained silent, waiting for what came next. "But the way you left, no one knew. No explanation." Gregory was truly affected. I looked her in the eye, voice calm. "I left a letter, clear, respectful. I paid my share of that month's expenses. And I took nothing that wasn't mine." "That's not what I meant." She hesitated. "What you meant," I said slowly, "was to control everything? Even how someone disappears?" Lenore's gaze flinched. But I continued, without looking away. "For 7 years I quietly learned how to fit in. I changed how I dressed, turned down projects, let go of clients just to avoid being seen as too ambitious in your family. And when I was at my lowest, when I lost a child, you sent flowers with a note saying it might be for the best. So tell me, who really disappeared first?" She was silent. For the first time I saw her eyes no longer glowing with control, but clouded with helplessness. "But I'm not saying this to place blame," I said. "I'm saying it because I'm no longer the woman who bends for acceptance. I'm me, and if we can't meet there, we don't need to pretend." Lenora nodded very slightly. "Thank you for being honest, I understand." I turned and walked away. That evening, I sat among the guests beside Thomas and the Westlake team. When Serena took the stage to present her segment on brand strategy for the next generation, I was ready for anything. Then, on the projection screen appeared a slide that read, "Lead Visual Concept Samantha Hayes, in collaboration with Westlake Creative." A moment of silence swept through the room. I didn't look over at the Caldwell row, but I heard the murmurs. And in that moment, I finally felt the thing I had dreamed of for 7 years. Not acceptance, but acknowledgement. I was no longer the wife who dabbled in design. I was an independent professional, someone a major corporation had to name out loud before hundreds of people. 3 months after the gala, I signed the contract for my first home, a small 2-story wooden house in the quiet Fremont neighborhood, not far from downtown Seattle. The front was covered in lavender with a wooden balcony that faced the lake, and a workspace with a big window that welcomed the morning sun. Every dollar of the down payment came from income I had earned over the past year, not wedding gifts, not inheritance. It came from effort, from late nights, proposals I wrote myself, deals I negotiated, projects I carried from start to finish. On move-in day, Olivia showed up early with a bag of scones and a bottle of white wine. "You know," she said with a smile as we sat on the floor surrounded by unopened boxes, "I've never seen your eyes shine this bright." I smiled. I didn't need a mirror to know she was right. My work had become steady. After the Sheffield campaign, I received multiple offers from independent brands. I chose carefully, only accepting projects that felt exciting and respectful. I joined a local design collective, not to network, but simply to have colleagues, people who called me by my name, without Ethan's last name attached. Among the messages I received after the gala, one stood out. Sent by someone I never expected. Charlotte, Tyler's wife, Ethan's youngest brother. "I know what it feels like to be treated like an outsider in that family. If you ever want to grab coffee, I'd love to hear the story from the other side." We met at a small French bakery near Lake Union. Charlotte shared that Patricia once called her a dull preschool teacher behind her back. She endured it in silence and eventually learned to separate herself from that soft power hierarchy. "You walked out first," she said, "and because of that I realized I could too." From shared understanding we became friends, not the kind who text every day, but enough to share everyday moments, a new coffee spot, a great book, a quiet afternoon watching the rain. One weekend afternoon I ran into Serena at the neighborhood farmer's market. She was 6 months pregnant, wearing a maternity blouse and picking out eggplants. "Hi," she said first, "didn't expect to see you here." I offered a small smile, glancing at her belly. "You look well." She set down her basket and adjusted her hair. "I'm taking a prenatal class. There was a lesson about toxic family patterns." She gave a soft, slightly awkward laugh. It made me think about a lot. I said nothing, just listened. "I don't want my child to grow up feeling like they have to try to be seen," Serena said, eyes fixed on the end of the produce aisle. "Like I did. Like you probably did too." For the first time I didn't see superiority in her, only acknowledgement. And in that acknowledgement something real, a desire to do better. "I'm glad you see that," I replied. "I'm not going to apologize," Serena said honestly. "Because apologies are easy. Change is hard." I gave a slight tilt of my head. Then change. We didn't hug, we didn't make plans, but as I walked away I knew. Some things don't need a dramatic ending to feel complete. Late one evening, with the breeze rustling the curtains, I sat journaling. On the table beside me was a cup of chamomile tea and a mood board I was designing for a natural cosmetics brand. Some visuals were still unfinished, but I wasn't in a rush. No one was pressuring me to deliver on time, so no one's embarrassed anymore. I wrote, "I no longer need to be seen in someone else's world, because I've become vivid in my own." A chapter had closed, not with a slammed door, but with the quiet freedom of not needing one at all. That afternoon I drove alone to Discovery Beach. The air was cool, the wind carried salt and damp pine. I sat on a familiar bench facing the horizon where the water met the sky. From my coat pocket I pulled out a small item, a house-shaped keychain Olivia had given me the day I moved into my new place. On the back was an engraving, "Start from where you choose." I don't remember exactly when I lost myself, but I will always remember when I found me again. Not in one dramatic moment, but through small, steady choices. Each time, I dared to quietly turn toward my own light. Sometimes disappearing from a place that refuses to see you isn't running away. It's beginning to exist, clearly, confidently, and more wholly than ever before. I stood, turned away from the ocean, and walked toward my car. The wind was still blowing, cold but no longer cutting, and inside I felt warmer than any summer I'd ever known. Samantha's story is a reminder that no one should lose themselves just to be accepted. In real life, so many people, especially women, have quietly endured unequal relationships, had their worth minimized. But change doesn't always require confrontation. Sometimes the bravest act is to step away, start over, and live true to yourself. Because once you truly see your own worth, no one else can diminish it. What did you think of Samantha's journey? What part resonated with you most? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow this channel for more stories about life, family, and the power of choosing for yourself.